Thank you, Lois, for being here with us and sharing this with us. We're here today with Lois Howard, a very interesting and amazing woman who's had a long and colorful career, typified by the notion of being outside the box.
Right.
So, Lois, why don't you define for us what you mean by being outside the box?
Well, I guess I have in my mind a picture of what a typical clergy person would be like. And that picture comes primarily from my father, because he was a Presbyterian. Well, basically, he was a minister of a very fundamental church. And so my picture of a typical clergy person comes out of that picture. Being a clergy kid, preacher's kid, I'm sure you've all heard that term, I wanted to keep the perception that they're usually, PKs are not always to be trusted. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I was, as a very young child, I was always perceived as very proper. And the congregation in which we lived and participated was very fundamental. And so there were certain guidelines that I had for sitting still and not talking during Dad's sermon for fear that he might call my name. Anyway, there was this perception that PKs are often into things. Well, I wanted to keep that perception going. And so I'll share a story of something I did as a PK that no one in the congregation thought was me. There were two elderly women who would sit in the front rows of the church for the worship service. And they used to take their shoes off. And I found out about that. And so I thought, wouldn't it be funny to get up there and remove their shoes so that at the end of the service they're scurrying around looking for them? Well, during one of Dad's sermons, I maneuvered myself under the pews until I got up to these older women, and I took their shoes. I took them and put them in the back of the church. And then I crawled back to my seat, and I sat there like I was supposed to. And when it came time for them to find him, it was like, well, who would take these shoes? Who would do that? Not me, not me. Anyway, that was my idea of what a clergy person should, what typical clergy people would be like. And my road has been very different. I started out differently in that I was not Episcopalian. I was a member of this fundamental church. And it was a difficult childhood for me because it was such a straight and narrow road that we traveled. That is, I was taught about a God that was a punishing, judgmental God. And so anything that I did that was the least bit wrong in my parents' eyes would condemn me for life. And that was a very hard idea to ever overcome later on. I don't remember a lot of incidents in my early childhood because we were in this particular fundamental church. There was a bishop who could move us every year if he wanted to. He'd just make that decision. So every May we would go to their little convention and find out where we were going to live the next week. Well, this was very difficult because I've moved 16 different times now, and we never knew where we would be next. And the other difficulty that I dealt with was that my dad had the idea that we should not, as a clergy family, have friends. That is, not close friends, because he would be viewed as someone who played favorites. And so I grew up. I had a sister. She's deceased now, but she was very different too. When we went to a football game, I would be watching diligently and cheering, and I would look over at her and she'd be either knitting or crocheting. So we had those kind of different personalities. Well, in the 6th grade, I do remember this, I was on the safety patrol, and the policeman with whom I worked could whistle very, very loudly. And I would look at him and one day I said, "Can you teach me how to whistle like that?" And he said, "I'll make you a deal." He said, "I will work with you, and if you can learn, I'll take you home in the sidecar of my motorcycle with the siren going." Well, of course, Dad was well known in the community, and I knew that that would be a large, embarrassing thing. So I really did work on getting the whistle. Well, I do that whistle even as the boys were growing up. I would do it, and they'd drop whatever toys or whatever game they were playing with, and bam, they were right there for dinner or whatever else I needed. And I still do that at my grandson's soccer game, though I was asked if I would please sit in the car from now on. Anyway, I did learn to whistle. I did get a ride in his sidecar, and he did, in fact, put the siren on. And so my parents came dashing out to see what was going on. There I was, whistling my head off. So, those were difficult years for me. But the most difficult thing was when my dad decided to leave the denomination that we were in and become a Presbyterian. What was difficult is that it was during my senior year of high school. We moved the end of my junior year, and we moved to Nebraska. Well, our friends thought that we needed bows and arrows in order to get moved in because of the Indians that might surround us. People had no concept of the fact that Nebraska was just as well educated as Pennsylvania, which is where I was born and raised. Anyway, I tried out for the basketball team. My whole life has been one of sports and music, those two things. But the sports, I tried out for the basketball team, and of course by the senior year, everybody's got their little cliques, and I wasn't part of that. And that was very hurtful. So the other thing that happened in high school that led to an interesting ministry is that the coach, not wanting to hurt my feelings because I obviously was not going to make the varsity, after tryouts one day, she called me into the office. And I had no idea what she was going to say. And she asked me if she noticed that I was clowning around on the bench. Well, actually, the clowning part was out of hurt. It was not because I was wanting to make people laugh. that was part of it. But I was hurting a lot, having no friends, not being able to play basketball. So she asked me if I would consider dressing up and being a clown and cheering at the games. Well, I was devastated because I didn't want to be a clown. I wanted to play the game.
In high school, you didn't want to be the clown, but at some point you embraced that. How did that transition occur with you?
Well, actually, that transition took many years. I always have enjoyed making people laugh. But I never thought of it in terms of a ministry until while I was on the staff at Christ Church as minister of Christian formation many years later. I noticed in the advertisements at UK for a class called The Art of Relational Clowning. And there was another person at Christ Church, Donna Barr, who talked me into taking that class. Well, it was very interesting because I always thought of a clown being put on makeup and a costume and making people laugh in that way. But this was different. This led me to 3 clown schools because I wanted to learn more. And boy, did I learn more. One of the very first things that we worked with ringling, some retired ringling clowns. These are 3 of my friends, Coco and Buttons and Frosty. And they were all on the staff at clown schools. One taught balloon sculpting, somebody else taught makeup. Anyway, one of the things we had to do was develop a character. And I had to do some really hard looking at what kind of a clown. I knew I didn't want to be a white face because basically a white-faced clown doesn't talk, and that was not for me. I did not necessarily want to be a hobo because I've seen too many sad hobos. So I settled on an Auguste clown, which is a clown who I wear size 54 pants. I wear clown shoes. I wear a hat that's much too small. But the important thing in that session was that we went around the room and we were asked why we wanted to be a clown. And most of the people there said, oh, we want to get dressed up and put makeup on and be somebody different. Well, these 3 gentlemen were very quick to say that when you put the makeup on, you become the person that God created you to be. I never thought of it in that way. And so it became very important for me to work on makeup. It takes me 90 minutes to put my face on. But the moment, and this is interesting, the moment that I begin to put the makeup on, I feel a change. I feel very, very close to Christ. And so I have special music that I play, and I can feel myself beginning to play. Peter's a very playful character. And the interesting thing is, my dad asked me one day, he said, why did you ever become a clown? And I said, because I like to laugh and make people play. And he said, no. He said, you know what I think? I think that we did not allow you to play as a child. That never occurred to me, but began to think about that, and any play that I did was always to get better than the person I was playing against. And my whole life, I have been very competitive. I'm not proud of that, but that's who I am. Except, interesting thing is, when I am a clown, I feel absolutely no competitiveness at all. Because each clown is different. We're not competing to be the best clown. We are competing to be the best that we can be as Christians and as individuals. Well, this whole thing led to a ministry at Christ Church. We had about 10 people in our clown troupe. We met on a regular basis. I did attend, Donna and I attended 3 different clown schools, always with the idea that we were perfecting whatever skills. Of course, the kind of clown I am, I drop things, I fall, very awkward, clumsy type of character, and that really fit, that really fit who I am. So that ministry has been very, very important to me. And my clown character's name is Beeper. Beeper works in a toy factory, putting beepers in little toy cars. And so I always carry little toys in my pocket. And I also do some interesting little tricks. But another thing that has really happened, I have not been Beeper for quite some time now, and I'm not sure why, but it's okay, because recently I had a dream. And in this dream, I was a member of Christ Church, and I had 4 little children who were working on a play. And I was in the balcony cueing them in. Well, after we did the rehearsal, they said, "Hey, can we play hide and seek?" And I said, "Sure, that'd be great. You hide." So they hid, and I found them, and then they said, "Now it's your turn. You hide, and we'll seek." So I said, "Okay." Well, I was in the balcony. Now, there is no balcony at Christ Church, but I was in a balcony in this dream. And in the dream, I decided that the best way for me to hide would be to be under the pews and roll under one after another. Sound familiar?
Yes.
So I did that. I rolled in the dream and rolled. In reality, I woke up and found myself on the floor. I had actually rolled out of bed. And unfortunately, I landed on the shoulder that had just been repaired, but it was okay. But out of this dream, Zach, who is the youth minister at Good Shepherd, found out that I was a clown and asked me if I would be willing to work with the youth as my clown person, teaching Christian foundational ideas, whatever Zach wants. But anyway, I can't justify putting 90 minutes into my face. Oh, and I brought, there's that picture. I brought, he asked me if I would consider maybe finding a new character. So I've been working on it. I have a broom, that stands up by itself. And so I sometimes carry that broom and I'll sweep and then set it up and walk off. What is this? Anyway, my new character is Sweeper, and I use little plastic cheeks that make me look like a hamster, but it means I don't have to put on makeup. But I put on a yellow pig with yellow pigtails and a baseball hat. But to me, you know, God has spoken. I work with a spiritual director on a regular basis, and I share this dream, and I believe strongly that God speaks to us in dreams. And so I shared this dream with her, and she chuckled, and I said, well, what do you think? What is going on? And she said, I believe that you have had some very heavy months in your life. And I had gone through a very painful shoulder surgery. So she was right on target. She said, I believe that God wants you to lighten up, to become playful again. And so, I don't know, I mean, you don't know an 86-year-old mascot for a youth room. Here I am.
Well, I love the notion of God wanting you to be playful, but I think that's a great way to segue to godly play, because that's another interesting outside-the-box ministry that many churches
Absolutely.
don't do. How did you get connected to that, and what inspired you to develop that and be a pioneer for that? Well, let's start with, what is godly play?
Okay, godly play is it's not a curriculum, it's an experiential, very Montessori type program, which initially was basically for children. Jerome Behrman, founder of Godly Play, started the program when he was chaplain in Houston at a children's hospital, and he would take the stories. He used little wooden figures, and he would take these figures around to the children in the children's hospital and tell the stories. And so that was how it developed. And soon after I accepted a position at Christ Church as minister of Christian formation, I told the bishop, I said, I'll be glad to accept this position, but I'm Presbyterian. Oh, he said, are you Christian? I said, very interesting question. Yes, I am. He said, then I want you as my Christian formation person at Christ Church, and I will send you to a variety of workshops and get you some training. Well, the first workshop I went to was at Canoga, our camp and conference center in North Carolina. And it was called Godly Play. I signed up for it because I thought, oh, here's a chance for me to play. It is the most, it's hard to explain, but it is the most fabulous way for children, not just children. I've used it with youth, I've used it with adults, and I recently used it with Alzheimer's. It's a way of telling a story using the figures, many of them on the shelves here. There are 40 shelves, incidentally, sitting on various shelves in this room, so that when the children walk in, they sit on this circle and they are enveloped with these wonderful stories. And then after the story is told, they are asked to respond to the story in some way, something that will help them think about the story during the week. And so they may decide to paint a picture, they may decide to do a puzzle, they may work with a story on the shelf if they've heard it before. And so we have all these children working by themselves, thinking more about the story in depth, so that it makes meaning in their lives. When I went to Houston to actually work with Jerome Merriman, I signed up to observe a class of children, just the real thing, to just experience it. Well, I ended up now with older children, which is what I wanted, but with the little people. This program starts with 3-year-olds. 3 through 5th grade is what initially he used the program with. Well, I was so impressed with the story that was told. Mr. Jim sat on the floor with these little 3- and 4-year-olds and told the story. You could hear a pin drop. It was so amazing. And so at the end of the story, he said, he pulled a wooden figure of the Christ child. And he said to the children, I wonder who this might be. And this little bitty 3-year-old said, that's the baby Jesus. He got his arms open to hug me. And I thought, that's pretty amazing. So Mr. Jim pulled the risen Christ off the shelf, and he held it up and he said, and who might this be? And another child said, that is the risen Christ. He got his arms open to hug the whole world. Well, these 3- and 4-year-olds were doing theology. Very meaningful program. And so I got a lot of training. In the year 2000, I was made a trainer, an accredited trainer, which meant that I would receive phone calls, and I've traveled all over the country helping other churches start this program. And then about 15 years ago, a chaplain friend of mine said, I would like you to tell this story to Alzheimer's people. And I said, I don't think so. I'm not comfortable with those folks. Well, I did tell a story. And after I told the story, a man who had been sitting with his head down on the table for years, he did not respond to anything. He lifted his head, and I said, I want you to think some more about this story. And he drew a picture of 4 sheep in a sheepfold. I was in tears. I could not believe the response that he made. And so I began using this as an Alzheimer's ministry. So I've gone from 3- and 4-year-olds to Alzheimer's folks. And this program is my passion. There's no question about it. When I have a bad day or I'm feeling down, I have many of these stories in our home, and I will go and sit myself down in our special room and tell a story to myself, just to feel closer to Christ. So this was not a game that we were playing. This was far from it. This is a very deep, deep program. And it can be used with any age.
Did you bring the godly play to Good Shepherd?
Story.
Your godly story? Did you bring godly play, the godly play program to Good Shepherd?
Yes. Yes. And what I basically did, and this may not be an answer to your question, Mike, but what I basically did when I went to be on staff in Danville, and that was another whole story. I went to work with the Presbyterians. I was jokingly told that I was sent to do mission work with the Presbyterians. Because I now am Episcopalian. But I took that story to when I first went there, they did not have it. I took that story to every group in the church and told that story so that they got on board with what I was getting ready to start. First Sunday I was there, I was in a 3- and 4-year-old class. I had never seen these children before. And after a godly play story, we asked questions like, I wonder what part of the story you liked the best. Well, any child can answer that question. Then the second question is, I wonder what part of the story you think is the most important. Well, then you begin to get deeper into the story. The third question is, I wonder if there's anything in this story that we could leave out. And some child might say, oh, I don't need to know the name of this river, having told the story of the Exodus. And the last question, which is the most important, is, I wonder where you are in this story, or where this story might be about you. Well, so I just told this story to these darling little 3- and 4-year-old kiddos. And these are not godly play wondering questions, but I wondered, what are they going to tell their parents when they go home? What was this like? Because it's very different. It's an out of the box. It's not typical of any other educational program. So I said, children, I wonder if your mom and dad ask you what this story is about. I wonder what you would tell them. And this little 3-year-old said, it was about Jesus. And I'm thinking, surely I didn't mention Jesus, because we don't. We want the children to develop their own faith, not mom and dad. So we don't answer. We don't answer specific questions. We wonder with them. So I said, I wonder what you're going to say when mom and dad ask you in the car, what was that story about? And so this little guy said, oh, it was about Jesus. And over on this side, another little guy said, it was not, it was about the Good Shepherd. Back to the first child, he looked at the other one and said, Jesus is the Good Shepherd, don't you get it? Wow. Wow. That's what godly play is about. Stories, wonderings, reflections, and all intended to help make meaning of life.
That is great. So I do have another question, and this maybe goes back to your younger years. You talked about your experience in the Presbyterian Church and with your father's congregations. How did you become an Episcopalian? What was that journey?
Very interesting. We were living in Richmond, Kentucky. Now my husband Scott, boys, Jim and Joel, a wonderfully supportive family, by the way. Whether I'm in clown or whatever, they are right there cheering me on. Anyway, I was organist, choir director. A lot of people don't realize I got a degree in organ performance. But I was an organist, choir director in Richmond at the Presbyterian Church. And I had 8 choirs, 5 vocal choirs, and 3 handbell choirs. And we had moved to Richmond from North Carolina for me to accept this part-time job. 20 hours a week, I'm supposed to do 8 choirs. Well, what it enabled me to do was to go to Eastern in my spare time and take all the music classes I had never had. I never had taken a theory course, and I was able to graduate and with a bachelor's degree in organ performance. But anyway, back to the choir. Wonderful male and female voices, wonderful people in the congregation. But the pastor and I did not see eye to eye, either on music or theology. And we did things like Vivaldi's Magnificat, Gloria, wonderful music. Half the music department at Eastern were members of the choir at the Presbyterian Church in Richmond. Well, one morning I came in to work and there was a copy of Calvin's Institutes on my desk with a note, "There shall be no more singing in Latin." Okay?
Okay.
So I began to look. I began to look for other jobs. But what happened, and I hope that people have been able to see through my sharing ways in which God has worked in my life. And once again, the door was closed. I could no longer work in this situation. And so I resigned. And the next week I got a phone call from Schuyler Robinson, well-known organist, choir director, who was then at UK, but also at the cathedral. Well, Schuyler we had known Schuyler in North Carolina, which is where we were before we moved to Richmond. So I got this phone call from Schuyler, and he said, "How's it going?" I said, "Well, not very well. I just quit my job and I'm looking for something else." And he said, "Well," he said, "I'm at the cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral in Lexington," and he said, "I could use an assistant organist choir master for a year in an interim position." "Oh," I said, "I don't think so, Schuyler." I said, "There's so much music involved in an Episcopal church." I said, "I don't think that I'm up for that." "Well," he said, "come and audition." So I auditioned and I got the job. So the night of the first rehearsal, I'll never forget it, hearing those boys, little boys, voices. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I also forgot to come in on the next organ part because I was so taken with these voices that I was hearing. So that's how I served there for that year and loved every minute of it. Did not want to leave because I was hooked by the liturgy of the Episcopal Church. Absolutely hooked. And at the end of that year, the dean of the cathedral sat down with me and said, "I know that you don't want to leave, but your position that year is up." And he said, "We never had a Christian educator here at Christ Church. I know that you have a seminary degree. Would you consider taking that position?" And so I took that position and served there for 7 years. and then joined the staff at Good Shepherd. So that was an incredible example of how God can work in our lives if we will in fact be open and receptive. And my choice to take that job came from a dream. It was a very vivid picture of the fact that I was the one that was to take that job.
Lois, can you talk about what you find inspiring about being an Episcopalian and the liturgy or any other aspect of the church that is different from what you experienced as a child?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, as a child, I was raised in a very fundamental church with very strict teachings. I never saw a deck of cards or a movie until I was 16. We didn't have TV until way after other people had it. On Sundays, we had to read. We went to church. Sunday school first, then church, then lunch, then another afternoon meeting, then a night meeting. And it was just church, church, church. Always hearing what not to do instead of this is how to live your life. When I first experienced worship at Christ Church, I was very touched by something inside that made me realize that the God that I had been worshiping was not the God that I would come to know later. The God that I love is a loving God. It is not any sense of, there's no sense of fear for me anymore. When I first experienced a healing service at the cathedral, I burst into tears, and the tears just flowed and flowed. Because I was used to approaching the altar as, I can remember the hymn that we sang that had, as such a worm as I. Everything, we approach the altar out of our sinful nature. When I experienced this first service at the cathedral, this was a loving God who embraced me, who is always there when I need him. And that was just so mind-blowing to me to see such a difference. I got used to using the prayer book, which has wonderful, wonderful prayers. There's just so much richness in the worship in the Episcopal Church that I never experienced before. And when I left the cathedral and came here as minister of Christian formation, I began a long discernment process because I really felt that God was calling me to ordained ministry. It was at one point a very difficult choice for me to make because it was either, after I was ordained, it was either be at the altar or be at the organ. So part of me wanted to be at the organ, although the biggest part of me wanted to be such such a clergy person that, you know, my whole concept of clergy has changed now. Clergy are people. They are not sitting on a high pedestal. The ones that I know and work with are just so loving and so accepting. As I said, I went through a discernment process, and I had a spiritual director, and we met once a month. And as I shared with him my involvement in godly play and all that I had already been doing, I had gotten very involved in diocesan youth activities while at Christ Church. My husband and I served as the first parents of 7 New Beginnings, which is a wonderful retreat program for middle school kids. I have done 12 haptings, which is a spiritual retreat for high school kids. I love being with these young people. And I said to my spiritual director, I said, I'm doing all this stuff, all these ministries. And he said, I see you as a planter of seeds. And I thought, planter of seeds. And I began to look at all these places that I have served now in 5 different parishes in the diocese. I continue working with Alzheimer's. I have written a booklet that is still available online. For my dream with the Alzheimer's was to have a team of people in each clergy, in each parish in the diocese, to minister to Alzheimer's folks. And that was what I shared with the bishop when after my ordination. He said, what is your primary ministry? Which a deacon has to have one focus primarily. And I said, my dream is to be able to have a team of people in every church in this parish that are willing to take godly play or some form of worship to Alzheimer's people, to give them the feeling that they are still included. Unfortunately, that's not happened. What has happened is that at one of our many godly play training sessions, international ones, a young woman from England was intrigued with what I was doing. She took my booklet, asked if she could use it, and went home and was able to get a grant in England for 16 churches to be trained. 16 teams from 16 different parishes to be doing what I wanted to do here. Well, maybe my program is designed to be across the pond. Maybe it will come back here. I don't know, but I continue doing it. I love being able to give to Alzheimer's people a realistic experience of worship, a reminder that God loves them. Anyway, that's...
Well, thank you. I would like to revisit beepers a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about the beeper ministry.
Well, the beeper ministry is just something individually that I do. For example, they asked me here at Good Shepherd to clown around at the pancakes on Shrove Tuesday. And it was the first time that that I've done anything in quite some while. So it takes a lot of energy to clown around, but it's I love doing it. But that's when I felt that meandering around the parish hall as people eat your pancakes was not what I really wanted to do. And I don't do birthday parties anymore. I got burned out on that. But you know, even in a parade, I could go off to people sitting on the sidewalk and use my feather duster and dust their feet. And all of a sudden there are a dozen feet instead of just the two I dusted. You know, that's not huge, but for those people, it is huge. A clown touched me. I have little stickers that say, I met a clown today. Oh, but my favorite sticker is one, and I love doing this, on my outfit. It's 3 letters, I and a Y and a Q. So I'll go up to somebody and say, read those letters. And they say, IYQ. Well, IYQ.
Do you find, or did you find that being beepers was a way for you to share God's love?
Oh, yes, yes. I have another sign that says, have you hugged a clown today? And I remember, gosh, this was a long time ago, but it was quite an elderly gentleman that had been at a family night function all by himself. I did not know him, and he came up after me, and he read, have you hugged a clown today? And he looked at me. I mean, this makes me teary now. He looked at me and he said, I haven't had a hug in so long. Could I have one now? Yeah. No, you never know. We never know when God is working through us. When love is all, you know, just share God's love in so many different ways. I'm a member now of Daughters of the King. That's a group of women internationally whose ministry is service and prayer. And we spend a portion of every day praying for people by name. Those who are ill or have lost a family member or someone else dear, or even a pet. So I spend a considerable amount of time still in prayer, beeper praise, you know, just silly stuff like when my family says, Mom, would you pray for this meal? Sure, guys. Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub. I mean, that may be seen as sacrilegious, but in the Howard house, it's not. It's part of who we are. So.
Yes, that's like good food, good meat, good God, let's eat. All right. Well, Lois, I think we're getting ready to wrap up, but I always like to ask, you know, this final question. I mean, your journey in faith has been interesting and full of ups and downs. Is there any piece of advice or final thoughts that you would have for the people watching this?
I would just say that in a the sermon that Henry preached a few weeks ago, he talked about the fact that Christ is within each one of us. My advice would be to take time every day to communicate in some way with God, but mostly to look at your own life. Ways that you maybe have ministered to somebody. Maybe you've taken a meal to someone who's ill, or maybe you've taken an elderly person to a doctor's appointment. Or maybe you just sat with your own children. Time with the family, time with our family here at Good Shepherd. Small groups are a way for us to contain contact with people. We have grown so much. I used to be able to name every person that came in to the church. I can't anymore. This church is filled with new people. And I encourage everyone to reach out, but to look at your life. Sometimes, one of the things that this has done for me is to realize where I've been. And I haven't always realized how many different ministries I've had, how many different lives I've touched. So thank you for the opportunity to share what has been an out-of-the-box ministry.
Lois, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being out of the box with us.
It's been fun.